Hi folks, Eagles beat reporter Mike Kaye here for NJ.com. This is Kaye's Take, where we take one of the more talked about Eagles discussions and we kind of break it down for you. We offer some analysis, we offer some opinion, and here we go with our first episode. So this week I wanted to talk to you about J.J. Arcega-Whiteside. Now, J.J. kind of had, well, not kind of, definitely had a rough rookie season. They drafted him in the second round with the 57th overall pick after the Kansas City Chiefs traded up for Mecole Hardman, who had a pretty solid year. He went to the Pro Bowl as a returner. Arcega-Whiteside was brought in to be the long-term replacement for Alshon Jeffrey. So they worked with him on the X receiver position throughout training camp. Carson Walsh, the former wide receivers coach, took him on as a project. And the results were not very good. They taught him the X throughout the offseason. He looked okay in the preseason. He had some flashes. And then when they got to the season, the wheels fell off, partially because of the injuries at the unit. You know, Deshaun Jackson suffered his sports hernia in week 2. You had Alshon Jeffrey missing several games starting in week 2 due to various injuries. And so J.J. Arcega-Whiteside was asked to step up immediately, but he was asked to play roles outside of the X receiver position. That set him up largely to fail because he didn't really understand the positions because he was learning on the fly. Yes, there were some issues with route running. Yes, there were some injury issues as well. He wasn't really used very often towards the end, towards that playoff run last season, largely because, he was banged up. He didn't really show a lot of progress. And while the onus doesn't only fall on the coaching staff and Carson Walsh, who was fired in January, J.J. Arcega-Whiteside's a guy who really just kind of came in and it seemed like the league was a little too big for his outlook at that point. Now, he's entering year 2. There are a lot of concerns there as the coronavirus pandemic has shortened or limited the offseason program to more of a virtual setting. Now, the Eagles aren't able to be hands-on with J.J. Arcega-Whiteside at this time to help him develop, to help him progress. It's a similar situation with Andre Dillard, who has been talked about as a little bit of a disappointment, had kind of an up-and-down rookie season. There's talk of possibly bringing back Jason Peters, and for good reason. Again, this coronavirus restriction on the offseason program and potentially missing out on the preseason is going to delay development in Andre Dillard and J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, and maybe even Miles Sanders for that matter. So the Eagles really need to kind of hone in with new wide receivers coach Aaron Moorhead, who comes very well praised from his previous stops at Texas A&M and Vanderbilt. He's a guy who believes in teaching all 3 wide receiver positions, which I think will help J.J. Arcega-Whiteside kind of mature in his game and become a little bit more versatile. Now remember, he's going to be set up to succeed this year, at least as far as getting more snaps and more reps and more experience, because, Alshon Jeffrey is on the shelf with the Liz Frank injury that he's got to recover from. He might not recover from that until maybe September. So when you look at that outlook, J.J. Arcega-Whiteside's really the only natural X receiver they have on this roster. He's their only natural big wide receiver that they have on this roster who's got a really good shot of making the roster. Now, obviously, he's a lock to make the roster, and the Eagles drafted 3 speedsters and traded for Marquise Goodwin, plus they still have Deshaun Jackson. So that's 5 guys who can line up at that Z receiver position, that flank position, or in the slot. They don't really have a guy to kind of take over for Arcega-Whiteside or Jeffrey if one of them is injured for a prolonged period of time. Reagor can play at the X position. He's got the ability to get off press, but J.J. Arcega-Whiteside is ideally who they'd like to have as the X receiver of the future, the guy who needs to be able to make possession catches, to go up and get it, to be able to, run a slant and pick up yardage after the catch and get a first down. So he's their guy that they're going to count on to be their big receiver, quote unquote. I think with Moorhead now in the house and, a healthier outlook, hopefully, for the Eagles, I think J.J. Arcega-Whiteside's going to be set up to succeed moving forward. Now, I think when we talk about the Eagles wide receiver group as a whole, Arcega-Whiteside, like I said, is kind of a rarity. he's a bigger receiver. They don't really have a lot of those guys, at least healthy right now. You can talk about Rob Davis, who has an outside shot of making the roster. He's a guy that they used kind of in that possession receiver role at the X position last year down the stretch because Arcega-Whiteside was banged up. Alshon Jeffrey was on injured reserve. They counted on him, but he caught one pass, So I think when we look at this wide receiver position, you look at the draft picks of Jalen Reagor, John Hightower, and Quez Watkins. Those guys are all pretty redundant for the most part. I think you'll see Reagor in the slot pretty regularly. I think you'll see him at the Z receiver position, swapping in and out with Marquise Goodwin, who they traded for in the draft, and then as well as Deshaun Jackson, who I believe will start at the Z receiver position. I think what the Eagles are looking at right now, if Alshon Jeffrey starts the season on PUP, is Deshaun Jackson at the Z receiver position, the flanker, getting a little space so he doesn't really need to deal with press as much. You've got Reagor in the slot, and then I think J.J. Arcega-Whiteside ultimately plays the X receiver position. This is a team that wants to get younger and develop its players. This is the opportunity for them to do so with Arcega-Whiteside. So it'll be definitely worth watching moving forward. This has been Kaye's Take. I hope you enjoyed it. Please leave comments down below. Subscribe to NJ.com. Read all of our stuff on NJ.com/Eagles, and we'll see you soon.